Hey, we're
Hello,
back.
hello.
We're back. Okay, you know the drill. This is me, Victor. That's Scott somewhere there, left or right side. You know, mirrored image. You never know. Anyways, this is Ask Us Anything. We have not prepared anything. This is all about your questions, and we're going to jump straight into the first one. And I know in advance I don't know how to answer it. Hi all, got a good one for a gaming backend. What's best, WASM, multi-tier containers, or Knative? I never deployed anything related to backend.
So
Scott?
I have. I would say that I personally do not see WASM in the success that I wish that I saw it, but I'm just not sure that it is mature enough for many things in the back end. As much as I love the idea of WASM. So personally, I wouldn't go down that approach because I think it's less treaded territory. I would say that containers for sure. In that case, and then when it comes to doing, just a deployment versus Knative versus anything of that sort, it really just comes down to Knative is great for getting started. Knative is a great abstraction when you need to get started. But there are best of breed tools that you can use if you have the expertise in Kubernetes that will work better for you than Knative will. Keda is a better autoscaler than what Knative has. Argo rollouts even, or the better one, Flagger, are better than Knative's rollout strategies. Gateway API with its full flexibility is going to give you more power than Knative's integration, even with Gateway API. So if you have the expertise in Kubernetes, build it yourself, build wrappers around that using tools like Crossplay or anything else to make it easy for the consumers, but do it that way. If you don't, then starting with Knative is great. And then when you outgrow it, you move to something else.
Just one note there. My experience speaking with people is that very often people think that, hey, I can use Knative and it's great because I don't need to figure out all the lower level components of Knative, which I feel is completely wrong and untrue. Everything that you just mentioned, Scott, even if you use Knative, you still need to understand how networking works, and it's not really a product
You
that
have to. You have to.
Yeah,
You
not your
have
users, but somebody does.
Correct. But the amount of knowledge you need to run Knative at scale is going to be less still, I think, than if you need to know still services, gateway API, all of that, plus KEDA, plus Flagger, plus because their API services are wider. Meaning to understand how autoscaling works in Knative, you have to understand that piece. It is going to be more difficult to understand the widespread nature of KEDA than of that. You still need to understand autoscaling. You still need to understand traffic shaping in Gateway API, whether it is being done through Knative or not. But the second that Knative only supports a subset of Gateway API, you only need to know that subset. You don't need to know the full exposure, right? So it's still less, but don't let people lie and say you only need to know what a Knative service is as the platform team.
But I feel, and this is now from the perspective of operations, not as users, right? The developer using your Knative or whatever. It's a double-edged sword because sometimes for me, okay, but you said it is using a subset of whatever. And then when things go wrong, it might be sometimes even harder for me to understand, okay, so which subset is it using? Kind of like what's really going on there? So I'm not 100. I mean, I hear you. I agree, but not necessarily 100%. I feel that okay, if I put my own stuff together, I know what those. I mean, that stuff is documented, right? Mm-hmm. I know what it is. I mean, I can find it out.
What I will say is Knative has done a major uplift in their documentation. I will say. So I would have agreed with you a year ago.
Okay, I haven't used it for a while.
Over the past year, they have really done a good job of. It's still not perfect, right? By the way, find me a single project that the docs are perfect. Like it doesn't exist.
Terraform.
Right? Like find me a single one that is perfect. No, Terraform is far from it. Right? Open Tofu, far from it. Crossplay, far from it. I can't add enough A's in that, far from it. There. And I love Crossplay, right? But Knative has done a really good job of updating the docs. Understanding that docs need to be persona based, so like different flows, having the technical details, but also having better like workflows so someone can flow through the document. Like they've done a really good job at that, I will say, which solves some of those issues.
Okay, we have Omar. With AI agents and MCP servers being built left and right, what's a good approach to stitch them together, or is it better to create new ones based on requirements? To begin with, when somebody says new ones can be interpreted in many ways. I don't think that anybody should create models. And I think that vast majority of people shouldn't be creating their own agents. And when I say their own agents, I mean start writing code of an agent from scratch. Yes. Now, if by creating your own agent, you mean I'm going to take an existing agent and put a different system prompt, do a couple of other things. I'm going to use Cloud Code or K-agent or this or that and kind of make it my own. If that's what new agent means, then I'm fully for it. I think that's where we are going for majority of us. Just not kind of like open a new project in Cursor and say, help me develop a new agent from scratch, simply because it's not that I mean, it's very hard to make them better than existing ones.
And there are really good frameworks today for building agents that are low code, that are basically just give me a better system prompt, give me which tools you want to add in, which MCP servers, and boom, you get an agent. Like you shouldn't be writing in Go, Java, whatever language you want, just building your own from scratch. Exactly. Use one of the good tool sets that exist out there that allow you to do this easily, like K-agent does, right? Which builds agents for you, but with no code, right? It's YAML.
Because at the end of the day, it's really, you get most of the way where you want to get with a good system prompt.
With a good system prompt and good MCP servers.
Yes. But here's the thing that I've been thinking. I feel that the future is use whichever agent you want. I don't know, you use Cursor or whatever. Connect it to MCP servers. And those MCP servers can be what originally MCP servers are meant to be. Like, oh, I know how to create issues in GitHub. Code-based MCP servers or reflections of an API. Or I think that we are going in a direction where actually MCP servers have agents inside.
We already are, and there are a lot of MCP agents that are agentic themselves these days.
Exactly. And that feels better because kind of what you really get. So let's say that you have two really kind of literal agents. The problem is that kind of it's very hard to scope the entry point of that agent, right? Kind of you cannot do everything. Kind of like you're only for this, so on and so forth. But if it's MCP, you have clearly defined tools. Kind of like, oh, I don't know, create the issue.
Yeah. Well, the one thing I will say is, you know, with it mentioned here that MCP servers being built left and right. That is, on one hand, I am super excited by some of the stuff and like that we're seeing that all of the industry is really coming around a format and around a, you know, mechanism like MCP, just like I'm super happy about like open telemetry, right? And that becoming a standard out there.
Yes.
I do have a very big worry, though, with MCP servers today, and that is that they are still very much at a POC level, most of them.
Yeah.
Like initial operators were in Kubernetes, like initial Backstage plugins were in Backstage, and like anything in this extensible world is. But the
Yeah.
real danger is MCP servers that don't come from a vendor, that come from some, random person who may be a genius, but on GitHub out there. You are running completely unvalidated code that you haven't tested, it says that its tool is open a GitHub issue. And in all reality, it is running a Bitcoin miner on your machine, or it is doing whatever, and you're giving it access to all of your tokens that are in your IDE, to all of the tokens in your environment. Basically, I think that we as an industry are in for a major, major issue. There are going to be major security flaws that we see, that people are going to get hacked. People are going to get whatever. There will be bad outcomes here.
Yes.
And we're going to have to figure out how we secure MCP servers, because that is a wild west today. And it's actually really scary to think how many people are just running random things on their machine and giving it access to basically the entire world, especially when most people don't follow what like me and Victor and I think most, senior engineers do with AI, which is let it do something and you review twice as hard as if a human was doing it, everything that it does, and you never just let AI do its thing. So many people just trust AI, especially like beginners and things like that. They're like, oh, look, this is awesome. I got a web server up. And what it did in the back end, we don't know. And the second you bringing MCP servers into that scares me. That really scares me. I'm not saying not to use them, but we as an industry have to figure out how we validate these things because, yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that we are moving in a direction where within a company environment, I'm not talking individual use, and within our industry software, I think that we are moving where actually you will be connecting to MCP servers running in your company cluster. Kind of not MPX on your laptop, but kind of this is the MCP server. That's how you connect to the cluster. We kind of set it up. We put the credentials. We went through it. We made the choice, blah, 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 all the stuff that we normally do, right?
Exactly. That's where, by the way, Victor, I think that MCP servers, because a lot of them do have to run local, right? There are things that can run remote, but there are things that have to run local because they need access to the local file system within your IDE to do and whatever and yada, yada, yada. That's where I think that remote IDEs, the Git pods of the world, the dev pods of the world, these things, I think this is actually what could make them succeed, because it'll be what allows you to run the MCPs in clear sandbox environments with company standards, with the company whatever, running in these isolated environments, giving it the access only to your IDE's session with the code there, with the tools that are needed. I think that could be a major thing. The one that I saw do this now is Octeto, and it is actually very cool, the stuff that they're doing now with like AI agents and whatever, and being able to run them remotely. I think this actually may be the year that things like Gitpod and whatever may shoot up. Not by this year, 2025. I mean, this year, like over the coming 12 months.
Yes and no. So let me play devil's advocate. Right now, and I don't know the future, right? Right now, there is a serious limitation of how many MCP tools, not MCPs, MCP tools you can run. 50, depends on the tool. Like in K-Agent, I think limit is 20, reasonable limit is 50, you can reach maybe 100. Now, GitHub alone is around 50 tools. And I need to start dropping MCPs. Doesn't matter whether they're remote or local, right? And you know what are the first MCPs I'm going to drop? MCPs that I don't need because agent can do the same work using my existing tools. Like I don't need, realistically, my agent does not need GitHub MCP. It's the first one that goes out, kind of like it knows how to use Git. Come on, right? And that's when, independently of whether we are running, using directly our laptop, so something like Octeto remote environments, still bigger focus will be on MCPs that actually provide the actual value, like kind of, This is how we restrict access to our cluster. This is how you send messages to Slack because there is no CLI, right?
There's no question that that's where we need. Those are the MCPs we need. But for the ones that need to run locally, I think that's why remote IDEs are going to succeed, right? Yeah. Because of that need. Unless we somehow solve that, I think this may be where remote IDs become something in enterprises.
Now, oh, wait. I need to remove this. Where are we now? Here. This question. Out. Somebody challenged me that I'm very good at marketing. Here you go. Scott, explain it.
Everybody, today we have an amazing sponsor. Go to learning.codefresh.io and pick up on your GitOps skills. Even if you are into FluxCD or Rancher Fleet or Argo CD or anything, this is the place for you to learn about GitOps from one of the greatest companies in the GitOps space. Go to learning.codefresh.io with code Victor for a 50% discount on the amazing courses. Whether you're a beginner or an expert, there is learning for you.
Man, you know what? I'm just realizing that I'm not sure whether I enabled local recording. If I did, kind of like I'm going to clip this part and just play it next time. Amazing. Amazing. Where are we? Oh, wait, look. We're getting rich. Thank you so much, Juan Carlos.
Wow. Thank you, Juan
Victor,
Carlos.
did you change your channel name for good? And what does Scott think about AI and its potential for dev platforms? Let me answer my part, and then I'm going to let Scott go for his own. Yes, I added AI there because I cannot stop thinking about it. I cannot stop using it. There's so much going on there, and I'm always interested in kind of what's coming. I've just got so obsessed. I did not, I promise that I will never put AI word in my channel, but simply that's where I am right now. I dream AI. I don't know how else to explain it. It's horrible. And I'm not proud of myself, just to be clear.
So I am less than Victor in the AI world, but I am very excited about AI and I use AI often. And it's an area that interests me greatly. But I am less fully surrounded by it and completely encapsulated by it. I think that AI has huge potential for developer platforms. In my mind, AI, especially like chatbots and whatever, are going to be another interface, if not one of the major interfaces, even the main interface for developer platforms. I do not believe that AI is going to replace the tasks that happen in a developer platform in the up in the foreseeable future, just because when we are doing developer platforms, we have to make sure that things are as exact. And when I create a golden path, that golden path needs to be as strict as humanly possible. And when I want an RDS instance with A, B, C, D, E, today, I think we are still far away from the case where AI will not hallucinate too often for me to offer that as what I am exposing to my user. The different APIs, let's say, the Crossplay APIs or things like that. I don't see it necessarily replacing something like a Crossplay, a Terraform, a something like that. What I see AI in developer platforms doing is offering another interface above my Crossplane APIs, where a developer just comes and says, hey, I want a Postgres cluster, and it's going to say, great, do you want it small, medium, or large? Do you want it in Europe or the US? Do you want it in this or this? Based off of questions from the APIs that I have exposed, and then it will go and create that resource. Now, some people may prefer a web UI, so they'll go to Backstage. Others will prefer a chatbot, so they'll use a chatbot. Others may prefer going through the Kubernetes API directly. Great. Doesn't matter. It's just another interface. And that's where I think AI is going to be for the foreseeable future in dev platforms, at least where it will succeed. But I also see it in other small places. I mentioned this, I think, a few weeks ago, but one of the greatest implementations of AI, I think, is like inside of CI/CD, when you're pipeline fails, collect the logs, collect the data, send it to AI, and ask the model, hey, summarize for me what the error is, what the root cause is, as much as you can find it, and what my next steps to fix this are. So I don't see AI coming in and just like, hey, build my app, and that being my CI/CD pipeline. No. What I do see it doing, though, is helping us with those debug steps, with those manual, tedious processes when things don't go well. And that's another area I think it will be brought into dev platforms. And it already is slowly.
The way I see it is that I have no idea what it will happen a year from now. I honestly don't. Like, if you ask me to predict a year ago whether it will be this useful today, I would say no. I was very negative to it. Kind of like,
yes.
I see the value, I understand where we are going, but kind of this is so far from being truly useful. Today, I think it's truly useful. Now, we can discuss, me, you, Scott, me, whomever, kind of like, oh, is it truly useful to write 10% of your code or 90% of your code? Is it truly useful to help you create documentation or this or that, right? Kind of zillion ways how, but there is sufficient usefulness for almost everybody today. No matter, I'm not entering now whether that's 5% of your help,
right,
of what you do,
right.
or 95%.
5%, 50%, or 95% doesn't matter. There is benefit to be gained from AI from every single persona almost today.
Yes. And kind of, I gave up. Whomever asked me, a year from now, I have no bloody idea. I don't think anybody does.
I don't think anyone does either. I think that just from the trajectory that we're seeing, that's where I think, at least in the foreseeable future. Now, foreseeable future, I agree, for me is 6 months, not a year. And that's also foreseeable future, not what for sure is going to happen. That's not near term. That's foreseeable. That's the future. What I can look out to is 6 months, and even that is wishful thinking.
I mean, if you look at it like, what, we got agents for real like half a year ago, give or take?
Yeah.
And that single change, I think, is a significant multiplier of usefulness of AI. That single, tiny, relatively insignificant change now we have agents, which are really dumb, just capable of executing whatever model tells. Right. Kind of is a significant multiplier. And then we got MCP, again, like 3 months ago, or give or take, I don't know, 4, whatever the timeline is, right?
Right.
Again, significant multiplier. Amazing.
But this is the thing. It's like MCP, right? It gets this huge, like, ooh, this looks awesome. And then all of a sudden it catches on like wildfire. On the other hand, have you heard anything over the last month about A2A, Victor?
No.
There was like this huge buzz at the beginning. It's like, ooh, A2A, this is going to be awesome. And I haven't heard anything in a month and a half about it. It's like, so that doesn't mean that it's not going to succeed. It doesn't mean that, but I'm saying that with AI, it is so hard to predict what is going to happen because some of these things have this 1 week spike and then they're gone. And some things all of a sudden catch on. And if you're not using it 2 weeks later, you're so legacy. This is like so irrelevant. Yeah.
Okay, next one from Nagas, something like that. Hello, I would like to create a complete platform side project using Backstack. Do you have any recommendation? Should I wait for Crossplay in V2? You don't wait for Crossplay. I'm assuming that this is you playing around. This is not, you're not using it in production. If you're experimenting with it right now, use Crossplay in V2 immediately. There is no good reason why you shouldn't. Assuming you're not going to production in 2 weeks, right?
Exactly. Well, what I would say is that get started with Backstack, whether it's Crossplane V1, whether it's Crossplane V2, just get started. Because, yes, there are changes in Crossplane V2, okay? But the 99% that you need to care about when you are starting, building a composition, building a XRD, all of that stays the same. The fact that now there's going to be a scope field, which is namespace or clustered or legacy cluster, and the fact that, like, okay, so you're getting rid of the 3 lines of claim, like, that stuff is going to be easy to relearn later on if you decided to start with Crossplane V1 because specific providers that you care about, whatever it is. Like, so just get started with Crossplane. I don't think it matters if you're on V1, if you're on V2. For the testing phase that you're in right now for getting started, do that. Now, if you were saying, I am building something now for my company that is going to go into production, I would say get started on the backstage side of things and wait for August when V2 comes out and then do the Crossplane stuff. And the reason is because Crossplane V2, while it will be mostly backwards compatible, and it will be backwards compatible with anything that you write starting today in Crossplane, because you're not going to use the old legacy features that are being removed. My general approach is that while it is backwards compatible, it's backwards compatible without gaining all of the benefits that you want from the new features of Crossplane V2, which you need to implement using Crossplane V2. So use Crossplane V2, test it now. Don't go to production with an alpha release that is not backwards compatible with what will be in GA. The alpha releases create now and destroy in a month. Crossplane V1.
If you're starting now, you're not going to production before August anyways.
Exactly, right? And okay, so you have to change V1 alpha, V2 alpha 1 to V2 when, whatever, when you change the API. Yeah. Big deal. Exactly.
Okay, Akash, how do you dump backup export Prometheus data with ease without losing hair? I feel that there are two things there. Do you need longer term data, like over a year or something like that, right? And I feel that Prometheus is very granular, right? I honestly don't care for such granular data for longer than days, right? Instead of backing it up, I think if you need it longer, you should move it to some different database. I mean, compact it, group it somehow, move it somewhere else. No, I'm not sure that I would ever back up Prometheus itself, because in my head, Prometheus serves very short-term analytics metrics.
So I actually do see use cases, and we've had use cases for this of backing up, Prometheus, of doing things like that. It really depends on the customer, and it depends on the exact use case and what type of data is being stored inside of Prometheus. My general thing is that, I would agree with you in general of how Prometheus should be used. There's just one thing. There's also a thing called reality. And some people use Prometheus for things that, do need to be saved over time, or that you do want to be able to look at historical data. In those cases, my general approach from an architectural perspective is just to use something like Thanos, in which case you're storing the actual data of Prometheus in an S3 bucket. And then that's anyways not the local storage, so it's usually much more resilient, and then you have the backup tools of that. So you're not actually ever backing up Prometheus, you're backing up the data that is exposed via Prometheus, or more so through Thanos, but through the Prometheus API. So it's the same exact idea.
So in that scenario, do you keep data as is, or you're compacting it somehow?
So again, it depends on the use case, but Thanos can do compacting of data and all of that as well. Again, object storage is so cheap relatively that, do you really need to be compacting it? It gets to a question of, do you actually need to compact it with how cheap object storage is in many use cases, in many clouds, in many environments, right? So,
but it's not necessarily, so it depends whether you're creating backup just because one day you might restore it, or you're backing it while keeping all the historical data. And if you're keeping all the historical data, then it's not the question about storage. It's a question about compute. Kind of, can you process really query based on years of data in Prometheus format as is?
With Thanos, yes.
Can.
With Thanos, you can.
But that's already falls into what I meant before, kind of like think about moving it somewhere else rather than direct backup.
Right. The only use case that I've seen really for Prometheus dumps or things like that, which we've done before as well. I can say this because I work at like a systems integrator, And we sometimes have use cases where, okay, you want to debug something that happened in a customer's environment, right? So it's the same thing if you're a vendor, right? And you want to debug something. Sometimes it is very nice to be able to say, hey, can you just export the Prometheus data from like this environment, and then I can go and just load that into a Prometheus in my lab environment and, you know, go through the metrics or things like that. Like that can be very helpful in like air-gapped environments and things like that. That's one use case that I've seen for dumping data from a Prometheus database, is so that you can do offline querying of that data later on in whatever. But that's a very edge case. That's not a standard thing. I think like if you ask another question, Akash, of just giving a bit more of a direction of why you want to do this, we could give you probably a better, you know, answer if there's any follow-ups.
Oh, another one. Thank you, being a member and all this stuff. I was wondering how come Crossplay does use the Azure Resource Management Go SDK, but builds on top of the HashiCorp SDK. Do you understand it, Scott?
Why it uses the HashiCorp SDKs and not? I'm guessing does not use. I'm thinking that the not is missing there because it does not use the Azure Resource Management Go SDKs.
Exactly.
Crossplay uses the. Well, again, are we talking provider Azure or provider family? Like,
this might be important to distinguish. There are, with Crossplay, you have providers that you can use to install custom resources, resource definitions, and controllers that match something, let's say Azure, right? And you have Crossplay compositions that allow you to design how to compose new interface, new API that will compose resources. Oh, I need this, this, and that, right? Kind of like similar way how deployment creates replica set, which creates pods. Or similar to what Knative does, which we were talking about before, right. But design it yourself. Now, you don't have to use Crossplay providers with compositions. You can compose resources, especially with V2, with anything. And then you can use, what's the name of, Scott, of the Azure? ASO.
Azure
ASO.
Service Operator. Yeah.
Right.
Exactly. I think in general, the main reason for using the HashiCorp SDKs is purely, let's look at every other tool in the IAC world that has come up over the last few years. Think of, let's say, Pulumi. Pulumi built a tool to migrate from a Terraform provider into a Pulumi provider. The same thing happened here in Crossplay with Upjet. And the reason for that is that the SDK, yes, they give me a lot, but building the full IAC representation and everything around every resource in Azure, if Crossplay needed to do that, everything that has been done in the Terraform provider, let's say for Azure, and needed to re-implement that using the SDK for Azure, and then for AWS, and then for Google, and then for all of the 450 plus providers that exist in the marketplace today, that would not be scalable. And the barrier for entry for a new provider to be added would be too high. The fact that there is Upjet, which allows me to utilize the wrapper that is built in the Terraform provider that talks using the Azure Resource Management Go SDK in the backend, right? I just have a wrapper using the Terraform resource model around it. Makes it so that building a provider and maintaining a provider and keeping it aligned with the community and the wider IAC world out there is much easier. And I think that that's why we're seeing Upjet and all that. It's purely a maintenance level, and what the real value of going to the Azure Resource Management Go SDK is relatively very low compared to the huge added value we get from quickly being able to adopt new resources and maintain it.
And also, SDKs tend to be very incomplete, just to be very clear. Kind of, yes. They're not always kind of, oh, yeah, SDK covers all the endpoints. That's actually far from truth very often.
And like another thing is a lot of SDKs, for example, don't handle retries and don't handle things like, you know, getting whatever rate limited and all these things. A lot of that has been solved within Terraform providers historically. And because of that, we can actually gain the benefits of all of the things that were learned that fix things around the SDK and actually built better wrappers and gave us these nice utilities. We can utilize that and we gain that benefit without needing to re-implement the wheel every time. So, yeah.
Another one. Oh, Juan Carlos, you're on a fire. Second contribution. Thanks so much. Just saw a LinkedIn post by Isovalence Helium folks, yes, talking about a bunch of openings they'll have coming up for A2A, agent-to-agent experience folks. Yeah. I mean, if I would have to place a bet right now, and I would have somebody puts a gun on my head, kind of like, you need to place a bet. A2A as a pure agent-to-agent protocol is probably the most likely candidate. Now, I'm not sure that we need agent-to-agent protocol. I think that actually we might end up using MCP for that.
Exactly.
Right? But it's AI. Everything is changing every second week. Kind of nobody knows. Nobody knows. Right. Those people that Cilium hires for A2A, they might end up building something using something else that we don't even know exists today. That's how it is.
Exactly. If the direction goes to direct agent-to-agent communication, A2A is a very good option. The question is that where the industry is going to go? But excuse me, I have no clue.
But it also depends, right? Depends if the direction is agent-to-agent, more or less open communication, right? Now, if you're talking about this generic agent talks to this agent that is specialized, I think that MCP is the better choice as a protocol, right? Because it directs your calling agent very clearly what it can do.
Right. And what about generic to generic?
Generic to generic, that would be A2A, yes.
Exactly. I have my HR agent, I have my marketing agent, I have my this agent. Those are generic agents. They may have a persona, but they're very generic. And then internally, they would use MCP. So I think A2A will be used in, or something of that sort, probably in large enterprise environments. I just don't know how yet.
Yeah. You'll see. The only thing I'm 100%, not 100, very, very certain is that MCP is here to stay because it took so much traction. Kind of like it's used so widely now. There is no tool that doesn't support A2A, including Google tools. And Google came up with doesn't support MCP, including Google started supporting MCP, even though they came up with A2A. And it's a different purpose, I know. But MCP is the only one I would actually, without gun on my head, place a bet on right now.
Yeah.
Everything else, no. Okay, where were we? How do you solve for integration testing in shared clusters? Do you only let one service deploy there at a time, which is a huge bottleneck? Do you have multiple clusters? Depends. I mean, so first depends on whether whatever you're testing, and I'm assuming we're talking about the final stage, whether we're talking about all being namespaced resources and you're not installing or changing any CRDs or anything like that. You can get away with namespaces. Most likely you will need a vCluster. And you need to be very good at shutting things down when you're finished. Because I feel that people still have that idea that end-to-end environment is something that lives forever, and then we need to start thinking whether we have one or two or three, as opposed to end-to-end environment, integration testing environment or whatever, it lives there as long as it's needed, and we can have 5 of them or 0.
Right. I think that the biggest question here is if you're actually a microservice architecture or not. Are you a distributed monolith or are you a microservice architecture? Many companies say that they are doing microservices. Most of them are not, and they are actually just doing distributed monoliths, in which case what the matter of that is that if I need to go and test my application and I actually need to deploy all 150 microservices and databases and whatever in order to test my application, it is not feasible to have a just permanent environment running, because to spin up all 150 microservices and databases for any integration test, no, you need to have a static environment that you roll back and whatever. But like, yeah, that you have to have, because it's not feasible to spin up all of that every single time and whatever. This is one of the pains. And instead of trying to solve that, my general approach is we do not want to make that better. What we want to do is make it worse, so that people understand that they need to fix their broken architectures and move towards a microservice architecture and start decoupling their things. And then we move into the dynamic environments and things like that. Because the issue is that if we give dynamic environments and whatever and make it, and we speed it up and we figure out some way to
prolong the agony.
And we do this, no one's going to re-architect to a microservice architecture.
That's true.
So we need to... You have to find like some new application that's getting started, make sure the team do it as microservices, implement the dynamic environments and whatever that they get for staging, make their staging and stuff like really awesome for that stuff, and like just like show that to the rest of the company and have them start evangelizing it, and then they'll be like, hey, can we have that also? Yeah, move to microservices.
Just one more thing. It's not only about moving to microservices. It's about moving to microservices and writing code that assumes that the interaction is done with current production. Right? Mm-hmm. So so let's say you have a front-end application that talks to some backend API. You don't talk to an imaginary API that Joe might develop tomorrow or not. You talk to production API, version that is currently running in production. That's what you are assuming with your application. And when production changes, then you can change yourself as well.
Exactly.
And if you make it fast, even better.
Right. Because in the end, which is, I believe, part of the microservice architecture of the fact that everything is independently deployable. The second that you build something against a future API that may exist out there, all that you did is tightly coupled yourself to that, and now they are not independently deployable. So you actually broke independently deployable, so you broke 12-factor app, and then you're not in microservices, right? But yes, that's the one that most people forget.
Exactly. What's next? From Vishai. As platform engineers, how do we push devs to think and work in parallel now that tools like Git work tree, cursor sessions, and cloud parallel tasks? To think and work in parallel. First, I don't think that AI tool...
They shouldn't.
I was about to say...
using AI to make their tasks go quicker so they can get more done in sequence, and we should be using less and less of these parallel tasks. I think that parallel tasks are like background tasks in Cursor and all that are great for like exploratory things, or like where I've used background tasks, I can tell you, is in one very simple scenario. I was building a new UI for something, and I spun off 5 background tasks, each running on a different branch of the repo, and I said, hey, create, this, whatever, because I had like 5 different ideas, and it went and created 5 new UIs that ran at the exact same time for the back end. And okay, you spin them up afterwards and you go and look at, oh, cool. Yeah. Okay. This one, whatever. I got to okay. So that's what I want. Prototype. Now, when it gets to the actual code that I expect to get to production, anything like that, a developer's eyes has to be on the AI when it is doing what it's doing, and it needs to be there guiding it along the way. So it will make it so that the feature takes a half hour to write instead of 4 hours to write or a day to write, but he should not be doing things in parallel. We are not at a level where you can trust AI.
Yes, 100%. I mean, there are exceptions. Like, for example, doing code review, yes, go for it. Parallel task, kind of like whenever there is a PR, do a code review. It will end up with a comment in that PR. You will review it whenever you review it, and you will merge it whenever you merge it. That's fine.
Because it's not code going to production.
Yeah.
It is doing a review task.
Some, not necessarily all, but I think it might be a good idea also to do background execution of issues that are clearly issues in GitHub that are clearly marked as issue, or relatively small issue, or something like that, right? Kind of like you have something that is likely going to end up with few lines, a few dozen of lines of changes, right? And then, hey, if you put a label, then it will run in the background, and you will review it again. You will not merge it, just to be 100% clear. You will not merge it, but the proposed PR is going to wait for you.
Exactly. If it's
now, if you say background run this new feature that is going to end up with 20,000 lines of code, please don't do it. Kind of like don't. But
yeah,
issues clearly marked as this is probably relatively okay. Kind of like I'm in favor of that as well.
I'm not, but I can understand it.
Yeah, I mean, my logic is so background tasks, background AI runs in a separate environments, right? That are usually restricted, kind of like you can do whatever you want on a file system because it's a container, it's a VM.
Right.
Now, my logic is, will it be harder for me to validate that if it's done all in one go and more likely with more mistakes because nobody was redirecting it or not? And for most work, kind of, if I detect after 5 minutes something that is going wrong, let's say that AI will take half an hour. If I detect it after 5 minutes, I will redirect it. And then the rest of the 25 minutes will produce better results.
Exactly.
Okay, where are we now? Alexander, what do you say? What do you see? Is the right disruption level for developers to deploy applications, and how would you archive that abstraction? Should you? Yes, for the latter question. Assuming that we're talking about bigger organizations, is 5 of you don't abstract anything. Like, come on, right. Use Heroku. But the answer to the second question is clearly yes to me. Whatever the abstraction is, just I'm not even advocating now API abstraction or Helm abstraction. Scott already changed the color of his face when I said it. Now, how would you accomplish that abstraction? That depends on the scale, right? What that abstraction would be, that depends on the developers. Never create abstraction without having clear conversations and many iterations with people, because very often you end up solving problems that people don't have.
Right. Let's put it this. For Linus Torvalds, the right abstraction is to compile your own kernel. For me, it's give me a Linux AMI that I can run in AWS or whatever. I'm not compiling my own kernel. For someone else, it's just give me an API and I'll run a container on that. For someone else, it's no, I can't even deal with containers. Just give me the source code and I will figure it out with something like build packs. For someone else, it's like, and I'll give you the container. For another one, it's no, that's even too complex. I'm just giving you the code and run it, and I don't even want to know anything. And that's the Herokus of the world, right? Like, so you have different levels of abstraction for different levels of developers. As you get higher level abstractions, the flexibility goes down. So you are taking away freedom and giving simplicity. In every organization, the trade-off of that is different. So there is no one size fits all with this, ever.
You know, a different way to think of it, kind of, I could not care less if you deny me freedom to, I don't know, run naked on a street if I'm never planning to do that. Right?
Right.
So the question is really, are you removing freedom for people to do what they want to do, right? If nobody cares about subnets in your company, that's not removing freedom. That's bringing simplicity.
Exactly. Right. It all comes down to, though, not what they want or what they need. And the question is also, do you build your API in a way, your abstraction in a way that it is easy to extend over time so that when new needs arise, it's easy to add in. And this is where I say one of the biggest mistakes that people make is they say, okay, I just want to expose these 5 fields. Like a good example is like, they say, okay, I want to expose, a cider block for a VPC. That's the only thing that should be exposed from a networking perspective is the cider block. So they put a top level field in their API called cider, and you fill that in. Okay. The issue is that in 2 months, when you need to start adding in other network level features, it starts to become a very weird API. If you instead created network and under that had a single field, cider. So yes, it is writing an extra word that the person needs to do in the API to get there. But you make it so your API by design is extensible, thinking where may people in the future need to expand this so that you stay with a cohesive API down the road. That is the most important thing when you're building an abstraction, because what you see too many times is 2 years into a project of an abstraction that has been growing by customers is that they end up with a monstrosity that makes 0 sense on planet Earth that no one understands because they added service mesh 6 months in, and then they added gateway API 2 months later, but they have some people using the non-gateway API APIs for service mesh, so they have different fields for that, and they're come on, AKS have web app routing extension and app routing extension and web routing extension. They have like 3 extensions with basically the same name. No one understands what the difference between the 3 are, but they're all there in their API because that was a bad API design.
But yeah, exactly. And this is not only related to abstraction. I think that everything you said applies to any API design, including database schemas. I think the story is still the same.
Yeah. API-driven design is correct. And the issue is that we as platform engineers for many years, or DevOps engineers, have not taken API-driven design into our worlds of infrastructure as code, as abstractions, as things like that. And we need to. Developers have been doing this for years.
But it's also, you need to be clear and strict, because no matter how well you design API, over time, it will have to change. And then you will be faced with the choice to be strict and say, we're going to sunset that, what was the CIDR? We're going to sunset that field. Let's say that we put it directly there, and we're going to put it in network. You have half a year to switch from using it directly to using it as a sub-parameter of network. And that's clearly communicated. And after half a year, we're going to remove it. If you never remove any or refactor anything because there is Joe who doesn't like it and there are 5,000 other people who will suffer because of it, that's not good either. Because you will never design it to be perfect. That's not going to happen.
Right.
I mean, look at Ingress.
Yes, exactly.
Now that Cursor has increased the price of Sonnet 4 to 2x requests from 0.75, how do we preserve performance and reduce AI OPEX?
OPEX.
What is AI OPEX?
AI operational expenses.
Okay. First of all, I think that Sonnet 4, and I might be wrong, was 2x from the very beginning, excluding a short period where actually Anthropic was giving it for a very cheap price. To kind of, I think it was excluding that semi-trial period. I think it was 2x always.
Yeah.
It's just, bigger models. I mean, I'm ignoring now how different model providers want to earn more or less money. Bigger models cost more. Thinking models cost more. That's, you can use GPT Mini and good luck. It's going to be more expensive.
Yeah. And I will say that I actually have better results with 3.5 than 3.7 or 4. I prefer 3.5. I actually move back to 3.5 consistently because it depends on what you're doing, but for certain things, 3.5 is even better than 3.7 or 4, right?
Yeah.
The one thing I will say always, if you are working in, let's say, Backstage plugins, 3.5 better than 4 or 3.7. If you're writing Go code, usually 4 is going to be better than 3.5. And 3.7 was actually better than 3.5 as well. From like what I have experienced with the Go code that I have been writing. Understanding cross-plane providers, like building object providers, actually OpenAI's models have been better than Claude models. So what I'm saying, don't be scared to test out the other models, and you actually have to choose the models. The one pain point I will say that I have with Cursor is I think that Cursor's auto selection of AI models has gotten worse and worse over time.
No, disable it immediately.
Exactly. I have found myself always over the last few months selecting the model myself. And what I will do always when I'm starting in a new domain is try out the same thing with 5 different models, see which one works the best for me, the best 2, try both them for 5 or 6 more tasks, make sure that I figure out which one I like the most, and that's what I use for that type of task going forwards. And, it's just certain models are good at certain things, other models are good at other things. Some models were trained on more TypeScript, others were trained on more Go code, and others were trained on more Java code. That's just the reality.
It's a bit tough because, models are non-deterministic. You cannot say, I'm going to use same task to those 5 models, let's see who performs better, because it randomly depends. In my case, and I know that this probably sounds silly, it's more about the feeling. I use one for a period of time, I use another for a period, or a similar set of tasks, not same task, and kind of like, this feels better.
Yeah,
I know this is not how software engineering should work. This feels better, but in my case, I couldn't get further than that, to be honest.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, we are almost near the end of time. How do you think we should start writing Jira Stories tasks in AI-friendly way so that tools like Taskmaster could start working on them immediately? Use AI to write your Jira Stories tasks.
No, never. What you should do is have a webhook, for example, from Jira, or there should be a plugin in Jira that after you write your task, recommends a rewrite based off of an AI agent that basically goes and writes like a new description underneath with its specific things. I have a major issue with AI changing our things. Like you just did the one on GitHub Copilot versus I forgot what the other tool is.
Coda.
But yeah, that I hate the fact that it edits your description of the PR. I despise that.
I agree.
And it should not be writing any of that. What it should be doing is what GitHub Copilot does, which is to write a good comment afterwards explaining stuff. That is the correct way of working. And I think the same thing should go with Jira tickets. Add that as the first comment automatically. And then from there, we can have Taskmaster, for example, pull the first comment off of things or whatever. And like you can have it based off of that. I'm not sure how much it actually matters to have Taskmaster start working immediately. I kind of find Taskmaster, very good for me when I'm actually going to do the work. Again, I want to be in the control here. I do not want AI to be autonomous.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Hold on. Let me fix that. I want it to be autonomous.
But it cannot.
I am scared as hell about that, and we are not there or even close to being there today.
Yeah. But, so, the part I'm not sure whether I disagree or agree, you tell me. I think that the combination of me and AI are very good at writing in general. Kind of, because it doesn't matter whether we are talking about Jira issue or GitHub issue or whatever, right? I have this issue. I'm never going to let it write on its own, right? Kind of give it 2 words and kind of go, right? But eventually, if we work together, it will pull the important parts of the code to put it there for the context. It will do a bunch of things that I don't find myself capable, right?
Right.
Some kind of symbiosis there is actually very, very beneficial. I would never let it kind of like describe the issue without my supervision, review, and all this stuff. I tend to review absolutely everything. But the amount of context it will add to the issue, no matter whether it's a human or a machine fixing it, and no matter where that issue is very actually valuable, I think.
Right.
The context rather than what should be done.
Exactly. And what I would really like to see like GitHub implement or GitLab or Jira or any of these things is actually like GitHub Copilot today goes and creates a new comment. What I would actually really like is, add the comment, but also I wish there was like a suggested changes like we have within PRs that you can do when you're writing a review, is have suggested changes to the description. So that me then all of a sudden as the author, I can see what like Kodo is doing there, right? Like I could see that, hey, we're suggesting changing the description to A, B, C, D, E, and then, but still, the description is still what I said it was until I decide otherwise. But then I just click, I'll accept those changes, and now my description changes to the AI one. I think that would be the best flow because in the end, it is better that it's in the description. I would prefer the description to be up to date of the PR and not need to go through comments, but I don't trust it to update my description the way that I want it done.
But and I feel that's where Kodo is doing it wrong. Ignoring now the fact that actually it should tell me what the changes are to the description, ignoring that for a second, it's not actually putting relevant information to the description. Kind of issues are not relevant information in the description.
Correct.
The description of the issue and potentially maybe some clues about the fix that is ongoing, kind of like, and this was changed, kind of summary of what's going on there is very useful. Kind of, you might have a linter error over there. That's not a useful description.
Correct.
Doing it wrong. But hey. Wait for the official MCP or build your own. I'm not sure official MCP for what.
I think this is just a general like thing of, do you wait for an official MCP from a project or do you build your own for a project?
I mean, if there is no official MCP for a project and I really, really need it, I would build it and I really, really need it. Just that it's important part. And it would be beneficial to have MCP, and I don't think it's beneficial to have MCP for everything. Going back to my conversation about Git,
right.
I would build it, and I would make it public.
Exactly.
That's how world moves.
Right. The way that I view it is, if there is official, always use official. If there is no official and you don't really need it, so don't have it. If you really need it, talk to the project or company or product team or whatever. Ask them, are you guys working on an MCP? Yes, it should be out in a month. Great. Can you wait a month? Yeah. Awesome. If not, then write something temporary, write a hack temporarily and whatever. If they say, no, we're not looking at it, we don't have the time for it, then okay, fine. Then either choose a project that is, up to date and lives in the 21st century that is going to have an MCP server, if it's something that deserves an MCP server, or if you can't switch, then write it yourself.
And there are many projects that actually start like that and end up being taken over, not in a hostile way, but kind of in terms of contributions of that company behind it. Like, I think the TKS did not started just by Stefan Prodan doing random stuff. And now it's official way how to AWS manages PKS clusters.
Exactly. The other thing that I would say on this is, like there was a great example, and it's not MCP, but it's similar. It's like dev containers, because we had mentioned that before in remote IDs and all that. Dev containers, one of the cool things is like that you can create these, features, which are basically OCI artifacts, but that have like what it is supposed to do and what it should run in the container to set up your environment. Someone just built one for Crossplay to set up the Crossplay CLI. And what I love to see there was that there was a Slack message sent in the Crossplay Slack, and a request for enhancement to Crossplay of, hey, I did this, it's out there. Maybe we should move this to the Crossplane GitHub org. Would you want this as an official, thing under the Crossplane org that can be maintained and be an official one? So if you write an MCP server because the team of Project X doesn't have the time right now to work on it, and you do, and you write it, how about thinking of contributing that back to the project? And now you don't need to continue maintaining it. You could be a maintainer and keep doing it even in their org, but you'll also get their org and you'll get external contributions to it. So I think that it just is like any other open source type of thing like that. Try and open source it if you are going to write it, and try and upstream it into the project itself. It'll be healthier for you, be healthier for the project, and be healthier for the ecosystem.
That being said, we are over the time. Thank you, everybody, for coming. See you next week, most likely. Cheers.